The House of Nassau is a diversified aristocratic dynasty in Europe. It is named after the lordship associated with Nassau Castle, located in present-day Nassau, Rhineland-Palatinate, Germany. The lords of Nassau were originally titled Count of Nassau, then elevated to the princely class as princely counts. At the end of the Holy Roman Empire and the Napoleonic Wars, they proclaimed themselves with the permission of the Congress of Vienna, Dukes of Nassau, forming the independent state Nassau, a territory which is at present mainly part of the German federal state of Hesse, and partially of the neighbouring state of Rhineland-Palatinate. The duchy was annexed in 1866 after the Austrian-Prussian War as an ally of Austria by Prussia. It was subsequently incorporated into the newly created Prussian province of Hesse-Nassau. Today the term Nassau is used in Germany as a name for a geographical, historical and cultural region, but has no longer any political meaning. All Dutch and Luxembourgish monarchs since 1815 were senior members of the House of Nassau. However, in 1890, respectively in 1912, the male line of heirs to the two thrones became extinct, so that since then they descended in the female line from the House of Nassau. According to German tradition, the family name is passed on only in the male line of succession. The house would be therefore, from this perspective, extinct since 1985. However, both Dutch and Luxembourgish monarchic traditions, constitutional rules and legislation in that matter differ from the German one, and thus both countries do not consider the house extinct. The Grand Duke of Luxembourg uses Duke of Nassau as his secondary title and a title of pretense to the dignity of Chief of the House of Nassau, but not to lay any territorial claims to the former Duchy of Nassau, which is now part of the Federal Republic of Germany. Origins. Count Duda Henry of Laurenburg is considered the founder of the House of Nassau. He is first mentioned in the purported founding charter of Marielac Abbey in 1093. The castle Laurenburg, located a few kilometers upriver from Nassau on the Lahn, was the seat of his lordship. His family probably descended from the lords of Lippborn. In 1159, Nassau Castle became the ruling seat, and the house is now named after this castle. The Counts of Laurenburg and Nassau expanded their authority under the brothers Robert.I and Arnold.I of Laurenburg. Robert was the first person to call himself Count of Nassau, but the title was not confirmed until 1159, 5 years after Robert's death. Robert's son Waldemar was the first person to be legally titled Count of Nassau. The chronology of the Counts of Laurenburg is not certain, and the link between Robert.I and Waldemar is especially controversial. Also, some sources consider Gerhard, listed as co-count of Laurenburg in 1148, to be the son of Robert.I's brother Arnold.I. However, Erich Brandenburg in his Die Nachkommende Karls des Großen states that it is most likely that Gerhard was Robert.I's son, because Gerhard was the name of Beatrix of Limburg's maternal grandfather. Counts of Laurenburg, California, 1060 California, 1123, Dudo Henry, 1123 to 1154, Robert.I, son of Dudo Henry, 1123 to 1148, Arnold.I, son of Dudo Henry, 1148, Gerhard, son of Robert.I, 1151 to 1154, Arnold II, son of Robert.I, 1154 to 1159, Robert II, son of Robert.I. Counts of Nassau 1154 to 1198, Waldemar, son of Robert.I, 1158 to 1167, Henry I, son of Arnold.I, died in Rome during the August 1167 epidemic. 1160 to 1191, Robert III the Bellicose, son of Arnold.I, 1198 to 1247, Henry II the Rich, son of Walram I, 1198 to 1230, Robert IV, son of Walram I, from 1230 to 1240, Knight of the Teutonic Order, 1247 to 1255, Otto I, from 1255 to 1289, Count of Nassau in Dillenburg, Hadamar, Siegen, Herborn and Beilstein, 1249 to 1255, Walram II, from 1255 to 1276, Count of Nassau in Wiesbaden, Idstein, and Weilburg. In 1255, Henry II's sons, Walram II and Otto I, split the Nassau possessions. The descendants of Walram became known as the Walram line, which became important in the Countship of Nassau and Luxembourg. The descendants of Otto became known as the Ottonian line, which would inherit parts of Nassau, France and the Netherlands. Both lines would often themselves be divided over the next few centuries. In 1783, the heads of various branches of the House of Nassau sealed the Nassau Family Pact to regulate future succession in the states, and to establish a dynastic hierarchy whereby the Prince of Orange-Nassau-Dietz was recognized as president of the House of Nassau. The Walram line, Counts of Nassau in Wiesbaden, Idstein, and Weilburg 1255 to 1276, Walram II, 1276 to 1298, Adolf of Nassau, crowned King of Germany in 1292. 1298 to 1304, Robert VI of Nassau, 1298 to 1324, Walram III, Count of Nassau in Wiesbaden, Idstein, and Weilnau, 1298 to 1344, Gerlach I, Count of Nassau in Wiesbaden, Idstein, Weilburg, and Weilnau. After Gerlach's death, the possessions of the Walram line were divided into Nassau-Weilburg and Nassau-Wiesbaden-Idstein. Nassau-Weilburg Count Walram II began the Countship of Nassau-Weilburg, which existed to 1816. The sovereigns of this house afterwards ruled the Duchy of Nassau until 1866, and from 1890 the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg. The branch of Nassau-Weilburg ultimately became rulers of Luxembourg. The Walram line received the lordship of Merenberg in 1328 and Saarbrücken in 1353. Counts of Nassau-Weilburg 1344 to 1371, John I, 1371 to 1429, Philip I of Nassau-Weilburg, and Count of Saarbrücken. 1429 to 1492, Philip II, 1492 to 1523, Louis I, 1523 to 1559, Philip III, 1559 to 1593, Albert, 1559 to 1602, Philip IV, 1593 to 1625, Louis II, Count of Nassau-Weilburg and in Ottweiler, Saarbrücken, Wiesbaden, and Idstein, 1625 to 1629, William Lewis, John IV and Ernest Casimir. 1629 to 1655, Ernest Casimir, 1655 to 1675, Frederick, 1675 to 1688, John Ernst, princely counts of Nassau-Weilburg, 1688 to 1719, John Ernst. 1719 to 1753, Charles August, 1753 to 1788, Charles Christian, 1788 to 1816, Frederick William, 1816, Wilhelm, Prince of Nassau-Weilburg and Duke of Nassau. Nassau-Weilburg merged into Duchy of Nassau. Dukes of Nassau 1816 to 1839, Wilhelm, 1839 to 1866, Adolf, In 1866, Prussia annexed the Duchy of Nassau as the Duke had been an ally of Austria in the Second Austro-Prussian War. In 1890, Duke Adolf would become Grand Duke Adolf of Luxembourg. Grand Dukes of Luxembourg 1890 to 1912 and succession through a female onwards 1890 to 1905 Adolf. 1905 to 1912 William IV, 1912 to 1919 Marie Adelaide, 1919 to 1964 Charlotte, 1964 to 2000 Jean, 2000 present Henry. From a morganatic marriage contracted in 1868, descends a family, see Count of Merenberg, which in 1907 was declared non-dynastic. Had they not been excluded from the succession, they would have inherited the headship of the house in 1912. Counts of Nassau Wiesbaden-Idstein 1344 to 1370, Adolf I 1370 after 1386, Gerlach II, Count of Nassau Wiesbaden 1370 to 1393, Walram IV, Count of Nassau-Idstein, inherited Wiesbaden when Gerlach II died. 1393 to 1426, Adolf II, 1426 to 1480, John II, 1480 to 1509, Philip, Count of Nassau-Idstein, 1480 to 1511, Adolf III, Count of Nassau-Wiesbaden, inherited Idstein in 1509. 1511 to 1558, Philip I, 1558 to 1566, Philip II, 1566 to 1568, Balthazar, 1568 to 1596, John Louis I, 1596 to 1599, John Philip, jointly with his brother John Louis II, 1596 to 1605, John Louis II, 1605 to 1627, Louis II, 1627 to 1629, William Louis, 1629 to 1677, John, Count of Nassau-Idstein, and in Wiesbaden, Sonnenberg, Wiehenberg, Schwalbach and La. 1677 to 1721, George August Samuel, 1721 to 1723, Charles Lewis, 1723 to 1728, Frederick Louis, Count of Nassau-Ottweiler, and in Rixingen, and Idstein, and in Wiesbaden, etc. After Frederick Louis' death, Nassau-Wiesbaden-Idstein fell to Charles, Prince of Nassau-Usingen. Counts of Nassau-Saarbrücken 1429 to 1472, John II. 1472 to 1545, John Louis I, 1545 to 1554, Philip II, 1554 to 1574, John III, 1574 to 1602, Philip IV, as Philip III of Nassau-Saarbrücken. 1602 to 1625, Louis II, Count of Nassau-Saarbrücken and Ottweiler. 1629 to 1640, William Louis, Count of Nassau-Saarbrücken and Ottweiler. 1640 to 1642, Crato. 1642 to 1659, John Louis II, Count of Nassau-Saarbrücken and in Ottweiler, Jungenheim, and Wallstein. 1659 to 1677, Gustav Adolf. 1677 to 1713, Louis Crato. 1713 to 1723, Charles Lewis. 1723 to 1728, Frederick Louis. 1728 to 1735, Charles. 1735 to 1768, William Henry, 1st Prince of Nassau-Saarbrücken. 1768 to 1794, Louis 1794 to 1797, Henry Louis 1797 to 1812, Adolf II. After Henry Louis's death, Nassau Saarbrücken fell to Charles William, Prince of Nassau-Usingen until Adolf came of age in 1805. Princes of Nassau-Usingen 1659 to 1702, Walrad elevated to Prince. 1702 to 1718, William Henry 1718 to 1775, Charles 1775 to 1803, Charles William 1803 to 1816, Frederick Augustus. In 1816, Nassau-Usingen merged with Nassau-Weilburg to form the Duchy of Nassau. See Dukes of Nassau above. The princely titles continued to be used, however, evidenced by the carrying of the title Prince of Nassau-Weilburg by the Grand Duke of Luxembourg. Following Frederick Augustus's death, the princely title was adopted by his half-brother through an unequal marriage, Carl Philipp. As head of the house in 1907, Wilhelm IV declared the Count of Merenberg non-dynastic by extension. This would indicate that this branch would assume the Salic headship of the house in 1965. Following the death of the last male Count of Merenberg, the Ottonian line, 1255 to 1290, Otto I, Count of Nassau in Siegen, Dillenburg, Beilstein, and Ginsburg, 1290 to 1303, joined rule by Henry, John and Emicho, sons of Otto I. In 1303, Otto's sons divided the possessions of the Ottonian line. Henry received Nassau-Siegen, John received Nassau-Dillenburg, and Emicho I received Nassau-Hadamar. After John's death, Nassau-Dillenburg fell to Henry. Counts of Nassau-Dillenburg 1303 to 1328, John in Dillenburg, Beilstein and Herborn, and in Katzelnborgen. 1328 to 1343, Henry, from 1303 in Siegen, Ginsburg, Haiger and the Westerwald, and from 1328 in Dillenburg, Herborn, and Beilstein. 1343 to 1350, Otto II, 1350 to 1416, John I. Tetrarchy 1416 to 1420, Adolf 1420 to 1429, John III 1420 to 1442, Engelbert I 1420 to 1443, John II 1442 to 1451, Henry II 1448 to 1475, John IV 1475 to 1504, Engelbert II 1504 to 1516, John V 1516 to 1538, Henry III 1538 to 1559, William I 1559 to 1606, John VI 1606 to 1620, William Louis 1620 to 1623, George 1623 to 1662, Louis Henry, Prince of Nassau-Dillenburg from 1654. 1662 to 1701, Henry, 1701 to 1724, William II, 1724 to 1739, Christian. In 1739, Nassau-Dillenburg fell to Nassau-Dietz, a.k.a. Orange Nassau. Counts of Nassau-Beilstein. In 1343, Nassau-Beilstein was split off from Nassau-Dillenburg. 1343 to 1388, Henry I. 1388 to 1410, Henry II, jointly with his brother Reinhard. 1388 to 1412, Reinhard, 1412 to 1473, John I, jointly with his brother Henry III. 1412 to 1477, Henry III, 1473 to 1499, Henry IV, 1499 to 1513, John II, 1513 to 1561, John III, jointly with his brother Henry V, 1513 to 1525, Henry V. After John III's death, Nassau-Beilstein fell back to Nassau-Dillenburg. It was split off again in 1607 for George, who inherited the rest of Nassau-Dillenburg in 1620. Counts and Princes of Nassau Hadamar 1303 to 1334. Emicho Count in Drydorf, Esterau, and Hadamar married Anna of Nuremberg. 1334 to 1364. John married Elizabeth of Waldeck. Minor 1412. Elizabeth, daughter of John, Countess of Nassau-Hadamar, 1334 to 1359. Emicho II, son of Emicho I, married Anna of Dietz. 1364 to 1369. Henry, son of John, Count of Nassau-Hadamar, 1369 to 1394. Emicho III, son of John. After Emicho II's death, Nassau-Hadamar fell back to Nassau-Dillenburg. In 1620, the younger line of Nassau-Hadamar was split off from Nassau-Dillenburg. 1620 to 1653. John Louis, son of John VI of Nassau-Dillenburg, prince from 1650. 1653 to 1679. Maurice Henry, son of John Louis, 1679 to 1711. Francis Alexander, son of Maurice Henry. In 1711, Nassau-Hadamar was divided between Nassau-Dietz, Nassau-Dillenburg, and Nassau-Siegen. Nassau-Siegen. The branch of Nassau-Siegen was a collateral line of the House of Nassau, and ruled in Siegen. The first Count of Nassau in Siegen was Count Henry, Count of Nassau in Siegen, the elder son of Count Otto I of Nassau. His son Count Otto II of Nassau ruled also in Dillenburg. 1303 to 1343. Henry, Count of Nassau in Siegen, Ginsburg, Haiger, and the Westerwald, and in Dillenburg, Herborn, and Beilstein. In 1328, John of Nassau-Dillenburg died unmarried and childless, and Dillenburg fell to Henry of Nassau-Siegen. For Counts of Nassau-Siegen in between 1343 and 1606, see Counts of Nassau-Dillenburg above. In 1606, the younger line of Nassau-Siegen was split off from the House of Nassau-Dillenburg, after the main line of the house became extinct in 1734. Emperor Charles VI transferred the county to the House of Orange-Nassau. Counts and Princes of Nassau-Siegen 1606 to 1623. John I 1623 to 1638. John II 1638 to 1674. George Frederick 1674 to 1679. John Morris 1679 to 1691. William Morris 1691 to 1699. John Francis Desideratus 1699 to 1707. William Hyacinth 1707 to 1722. Frederick William Adolf 1722 to 1734. Frederick William II. In 1734, Nassau-Siegen fell to Nassau-Dietz, a.k.a. Orange-Nassau. Counts and Princes of Nassau-Dietz 1606 to 1632. Ernst Casimir 1632 to 1640. Henry Casimir I 1640 to 1664. William Frederick, Prince from 1650. 1664 to 1696. Henry Casimir II of Nassau-Dietz, Prince of Nassau-Dietz. 1696 to 1711. John William Fraser, Prince of Nassau-Dietz. Orange-Nassau. The House of Orange-Nassau stems from the Ottonian line. The connection was via Engelbert I, who offered his services to the Duke of Burgundy, married a Dutch noblewoman and inherited lands in the Netherlands, with the barony of Breda as the core of his Dutch possessions. The importance of the Nassau grew throughout the 15th and 16th century. Henry III of Nassau-Breda was appointed Stadtholder of Holland, Zeeland and Utrecht by Emperor Charles V in the beginning of the 16th century. Henry was succeeded by his son, René of Châlons-Orange in 1538, who was, as can be inferred from his name, a Prince of Orange. When René died prematurely on the battlefield in 1544, his possessions and the princely title passed to his cousin, William the Silent, a Count of Nassau-Dillenburg. By dropping the suffix name, Dillenburg, from then on the family members called themselves Orange-Nassau. With the death of William III, the legitimate direct male line of William the Silent became extinct and thereby the first House of Orange-Nassau. John William Fraser, the senior agnatic descendant of William the Silent's brother and a cognatic descendant of Frederick Henry, grandfather of William III, inherited the princely title and all the possessions in the Low Countries and Germany, but not the Principality of Orange itself. The principality was ceded to France under the Treaty of Utrecht that ended the wars with King Louis XIV. John William Fraser, who also was the Prince of Nassau-Dietz, founded thereby the Second House of Orange-Nassau. The Revolutionary and Napoleonic Era was a tumultuous episode of the history of both the Ottonian and Walramian branches of the House of Nassau. France's dominance of the international order severely strained the House of Nassau's traditional strategy of international conflict resolution, which was to maintain links with all serious power brokers through a dynastic network in the hope of playing one off against the other. Despite that, both branches of the House of Nassau reinvigorated the dynastic network in the years of liberation 1812 to 1814. The post-Napoleonic European order saw both branches set on different historical paths. After the post-Napoleonic reorganization of Europe, the head of House of Orange-Nassau gained the title King, Queen of the Netherlands, Princes of Orange. House of Orange-Nassau, first creation 1544 to 1584. William I, also Count of Katzenelnbogen, Viaden, Dietz, Buren and Leerdam and Lord of Eiselstein, 1584 to 1618. Philip William, also Count of Nassau-Dillenburg, Count of Viaden, Buren and Leerdam and Lord of Eiselstein, 1618 to 1625. Maurice, also Count of Nassau-Dillenburg, Count of Viaden, Buren and Leerdam and Lord of Eiselstein, 1625 to 1647. Frederick Henry, also Count of Nassau-Dillenburg, Count of Viaden, Buren and Leerdam and Lord of Eiselstein, 1647 to 1650. William II, also Count of Nassau-Dillenburg, Count of Viaden, Buren and Leerdam and Lord of Eiselstein, 1650 to 1702. William III, also Count of Nassau-Dillenburg, Count of Viaden, Buren and Leerdam, Lord of Eiselstein and King of England, Scotland, and Ireland. In 1702, the Orange-Nassau-Dillenburg line died out and its possessions fell to the Nassau-Dietz line. House of Orange-Nassau, second creation 1702 to 1711. John William Fraser, also Prince of Nassau-Dietz, Count of Viaden, Buren and Leerdam and Lord of Eiselstein, 1711 to 1751. William IV, also Prince of Nassau-Dietz, Count of Viaden, Buren and Leerdam and Lord of Eiselstein, 1751 to 1806, William V, also Prince of Nassau, Dietz, Count of Viarden, Buren and Leerdam and Lord of Eiselstein. 1806 to 1815, William VI, also Prince of Fulda and Count of Corvey, Weingarten and Dortmund. In 1815 became King William I of the Netherlands. Kings and Queens of the Netherlands. 1815 to 1840, William I, also Duke and Grand Duke of Luxembourg and Duke of Limburg. 1840 to 1849, William II, also Grand Duke of Luxembourg and Duke of Limburg. 1849 to 1890, William III, also Grand Duke of Luxembourg and Duke of Limburg. 1890 to 1948, Wilhelmina. Following German laws, the House of Orange-Nassau has been extinct since the death of Wilhelmina. Dutch laws and the Dutch nation do not consider it extinct. 1948 to 1980, Juliana. 1980 to 2013, Beatrix. 2013 present, Willem Alexander. Family tree. The following family tree is compiled from Wikipedia and the reference cited in the note. House of Orange and Nassau. A summary family tree of the House of Orange-Nassau from the joining of the House of Nassau, Breda, Dillenburg and the House of Chalon-Arlay-Orange to the end of the Dutch Republic is shown below. The family spawned many famous statesmen and generals, including two of the acknowledged first captains of their age, Maurice of Nassau and the Marshal de Turenne. House of Nassau-Weilburg compiled from Wikipedia and